Here we go. Hey everyone, this is Dee. Welcome to Catalyst Energies. Thank you for joining me. I am so grateful that we're all here at this momentous time. This is a Catalyst astrology report for the fourth quarter of our lunar cycle that started with the new moon at 0 degrees Cancer. That was a solar eclipse. And we are moving in now to the fourth quarter. We have our waning moon. We have a new moon coming on July 20th at 28 degrees Cancer. So we're kind of bookending this Cancer energy. And this will be the first new moon in Cancer since 2017 that is not being eclipsed. And so, although I would not necessarily call this normal by any stretch, the energy associated with this new moon will not have the eclipse attached to it. So it will not be reverberating for months to come what we intend with this energy, with the new moon. But this report is about the last quarter. So the third quarter square that happened yesterday, July 12th, between a sun in Cancer and a moon in Aries, on the same day where Mercury stationed direct, and also where the sun had trined Neptune retrograde. So we'll talk about all of those things. Chiron is now retrograde in Aries as well. So we had a moon in Aries when Chiron stationed retrograde. Then the moon came and was conjunct Mars, was conjunct Chiron. So there was a lot of flaring emotionally, a lot of temper, a lot of ambition and confidence emotionally to project ourselves out. Remember, Aries is cardinal fire. There is directional energy. Aries is the electricity aspect of fire and energy because there's movement, right? And the movement is electricity. Electricity is the movement of electrons in order to balance charge within any form of matter. So the most natural form is lightning. So when lightning happens, it is a discharge of energy when the charged ions in our atmosphere are getting so unbalanced that the electrons will move, right? They will move from atom to atom in order to balance the charge, and as a result we have electricity. It's a discharge of energy, so it's an immediate thing. So moon in Aries is a very hot flared temper, but dissipates very quickly. It's almost in a flash. It's like getting an electrical burn, which happens immediately but is very devastating and just as painful as well. And interestingly enough, water conducts electricity, and so having the moon in Aries makes it even more powerful and even more even, I would say, allows that electricity and allows that creative fire to move even quicker. So but it also like I said, dissipates quickly. But we had Chiron go retrograde, and then the moon was conjunct Mars and retrograde Chiron on that day. And then, like I said, we had Mercury stationing direct in Cancer. We had the sun in Cancer trining Neptune retrograde in Pisces. That was a beautiful, beautiful aspect that really helped balance some things out for us if we really aligned with that. And we'll talk about all of that stuff. And the third quarter square, which was the moon in Aries and the sun in Cancer. And as we move through this week, right, there's going to be the sun in Cancer, late Cancer, is going to oppose all of our friends in late Capricorn. So Jupiter retrograde, Saturn retrograde, Pluto retrograde, Pallas Athena retrograde, all in Capricorn. And the sun representing, our ego, our full expression of our conscious personality, in opposition to these large transpersonal energies that are rewriting the entire 3D, not even rewriting it, just destroying it, just like breaking it down and leaving room for the next cycle. But Capricorn is about the structures that we have built collectively around us to give us security and structure, whereas Cancer is all about the inner emotional security. And it's not so much about inner security, and it does represent a structure or a shell that contains us, much like the crab, right? The crab is what is the animal that represents the Cancer archetype. There is some sort of vessel there is some sort of containment. You know, Cancer is very maternal. It is the womb. It is nourishment and protection, but it's within the feminine, and it has to do with our emotional aspect, and it has to do where we belong. Where is our family and our home? What allows us to feel emotionally secure and safe or not? You know, that's the other thing. It is the vessel that allows us to come to know our personality fully from an emotional perspective, because the next stage is Leo, and that's full expression of who we are without any real connection to how it impacts other people, or even being influenced by other people. We're still very individualized at this part of the chart where the sun is Cancer into Leo. So we're going to talk all about how this week is going to unfold as we lead up to this next new moon. So let's look at the chart here. This is the chart for the third quarter square. That was yesterday, July 12th, as you can see, 4:30 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. Chiron has already gone retrograde in Aries, and so the wounded healer, moving through these early degrees of Aries as we're starting to get a real, a very basic sense of subjective experience, the seed point, as it were. And now Chiron, the wounded healer, the victimization that can go along with that. We're going to go back over some old territory, and it's going to become very obvious and unavoidable at this time. And it's going to be projected inward, right? This is a real good opportunity for it to be doing this work within, because up until now, I feel like we've been projecting a lot of this out as Chiron's been direct, right? We've been projecting it out in terms of victimization, but now it's retrograde, so it's going to not only be internalized experience but also more obvious. We're paying attention to Chiron more because it appears that we're moving backwards, and it will feel like a regression around this. And so don't be surprised if you start feeling more hopeless, if you start feeling more like a victim, if you start feeling wounded, and those wounds of self-worth coming back up. These are all part of Chiron going retrograde. And I think it's a bumpy ride at first, especially because we had the moon conjunct with Chiron after going retrograde over the weekend. That flaring temper, that electrical burn, it's so intense. And Aries is cardinal fire, and it's directional. It's got movement. It is action potential. So, and we're talking about the symbols, the images that we're emotionally attached to, coming to a point where we realize the symbolism that is the higher symbolism, right? We can detach a little bit from it and see them as symbols, as opposed to directly emotionally connecting to the images and acting from that trigger. So it's going to be a bumpy ride with Chiron going retrograde, and then to have Mercury moving direct on the same day that the square from the moon to the sun. Now, third quarter square is a crisis in consciousness. The full moon illuminated the things that are normally hidden in our subconscious that we must release in order to fulfill the rest of this lunar cycle. But because it was an eclipse, that means that the shadow of the earth was projected onto the moon, and so it was distorted. We didn't see it at its fullest. And there may have been aspects that were shadowed. We did not get an opportunity to see very clearly, which is why these eclipses will last and reverberate for months, because we didn't get a clear sense. So we need time, and there'll be other aspects that come around that will lead us back to this moment. Well, the full moon, specifically the lunar eclipse that was on the 4th of July. Woo, boy. So the crisis in consciousness is that square between the sun, which is our full, ego, the yang aspect of our personality, the full expression of who we are, the heart opening, right? It's very innocent and playful and childlike and not really caring and having it's pure ego in the sense that we are not thinking about other people in the Leo energy, and because the sun rules Leo. And so with the sun, it's just the fullness of who we are expressed outwards. And in late Cancer, like this, where it's square to Aries with late Cancer, again, Cancer is cardinal water. Again, it's directional. And the direction that we are finding ourselves emotionally is really rooting down. That's the direction that it seems to go is rooting down into the core of who we are and coming to terms with where we belong and what surrounds us that allows us to feel emotionally secure and emotionally vulnerable to eventually come to express ourselves fully. So in late Cancer, the sun is getting pretty sure of itself, right? And feeling very secure, feeling very safe, right? Feeling like our fam's got our back, right? Whatever that means to us. So when it's square to the moon in late Aries, that is emotionally and internally, like we can just create anything. I can create anything I want. And this degree specifically, there is a certain element of group cooperation that goes along with it. There is this moment of realization that we can create anything that we put our minds to. It's like this cosmic optimism. But the late degree, the same degree of Cancer where the sun is, there's a certain amount of waiting and trust in the situation. The Sabian symbol is a young girl or a young woman waiting for a sailboat, right? And it's, are we going to, and this is where the crisis, I think, in consciousness really came into effect, is that, you know, in terms of a personal experience, emotionally, internally, how we feel about things, we know we can create anything we want as long as we put our mind and our energy to it. It's all there for us. The whole potential of reality is available to us as long as we engage it, right? But the square comes with the sun here that is asking us to trust that our boat is going to come to us. And a boat kind of is like the vessel in some ways, but with Cancer energy, it is the vessel that holds our emotional safety and stability. It holds our emotional vulnerability at the same time. But you really felt this real tension of like, I want to create, and I know I can create anything that I want, and we can all create anything we want. But at the same time, it's like, well, are we going to wait for the vessel? Are we going to trust that the vessel is coming, that is going to take us across the ocean, right? That is going to allow us to float on the sea of consciousness, as opposed to the moon, that if you go into water, electricity is conducted by water. So if you fall into the water, you're going to be electrocuted. But you're not really thinking about that at this point. You're just like, I'm going to create anything. And so that square there, I think that was the crisis in the consciousness. And what are we going to do? Are we going to activate, or like, are we going to activate our potential, or are we going to activate where we belong? Not even activate. Are we going to trust our belonging? And we belong to the earth, really. That's, I mean, the deepest aspect of Cancer and the maternal archetype, that we belong to the earth as our mother. And waiting for the ship to come in requires trust and patience. So I feel like, especially with Chiron going retrograde and then having Mercury go direct in Cancer, and so the mind very swiftly is now like, oh, okay, I'm starting to get it. We went over all this territory in Cancer now, and I'm going to go back, and I've learned so much. And so now we're going to go back over it and start moving very quickly through these realms again about what it means to be safe and secure and where we belong. And things are going to start moving quickly. They're really going to start moving very quickly. And this week is going to be real challenge because the moon is moving into the moon is in Taurus today, right? So we're going to look at that. Here's the moon in Taurus. So you can see that the moon's going to conjunct Uranus soon. And the big aspects here is that Mars is going to conjunct Chiron retrograde on the 14th. Let's go right to because this is the 13th. Oops. So here's the 14th. So Chiron and Mars will be conjunct. And so Mars, the warrior energy, the action hero, is going to come along and really just activate that Chiron retrograde as well. And Mars wants to move forward, and Chiron is now going backwards. And so they're going to conjunct, and then they're going to keep going their separate ways. And so in some ways they can kind of like come together And, Mars is saying, Chiron, like, stop. You got to take, I keep thinking of Mars, because it's an action hero. It's just like nothing can stop me. I'm just going to keep charging forward. I have my marching orders and I'm moving. And Mars is in home territory in Aries. So they're going to meet and they might kind of like um take something from each other as they move on their separate ways, which is Chiron will get some of Mars's ambition and courage, because it's going to take some serious courage, people, to go with Chiron retrograde in Aries. It really will. This is going to challenge each of us very deeply and individually, and it's going to be painful, very, very painful to look at these aspects within us, as opposed to what we've been doing, which is looking at them in the collective and identifying them outside of us. Now it's time to identify them within us, and that's going to be a lot harder and more painful. Now, so Chiron will get some of Aries courage and fearlessness, and Mars will get some recognition of the importance of identifying where our wounds are, and not, Mars needs to acknowledge that a little bit as he's moving forward on the war path, and that, there are wounds to be considered as he moves forward. Okay. So this is the 14th, Tuesday. The other major aspect this day is now the first opposition to the Capricorn crew over here. The Sun opposing Jupiter retrograde. So this degree that Jupiter is in is a soldier accepting 2 awards for bravery, right? This is the idea that no matter what, if you have enacted your duty, whatever that is, regardless of what side you're on, you either you win or you lose. It's the idea that standing for what you're standing for what you are serving deserves recompense regardless, as long as you're doing it with integrity and honor, and not backing down, right? And so again, Jupiter is retrograde, so it is expanding in this leadership within us. And this has been, Jupiter is not in a good Jupiter is at its fall position in Capricorn. It is exalted in Cancer. So it is not, the longer that Jupiter stays in Capricorn, the less power it has. And now it's retrograde, so it's all internalized as well. And so, this leadership position, having to accept awards for bravery, it's not easy. It takes a certain amount of humility in order to do this, but there's a recognition socially and culturally that no matter what, there deserves some sort of recompense for serving honorably and faithfully for what for who and what you're serving, which is these collective institutionalized structures. So even though they're being like completely wiped out, the fact that we are serving and not even serving, but expanding upon and providing a leadership position in some ways on this stripping away of these institutions, no matter what, deserves some sort of recognition by the collective. The opposition here with the Sun in Cancer, like I said, this is about, the Sun is the ego. It is the full expression of who we are. And without any, it is the center of everything. The Sun is. And so late Cancer, getting very much focused on consolidating our personal power and feeling very secure in where we belong. And that could be, the fulcrum point here is to not get pulled into one way or the other, but to find that balance point between these two aspects. And so you're not getting pulled into this Jupiter that's just like, oh, we're all fighting the battle and we're all a leader in some way, and so everybody gets a trophy. Right? A participation trophy. Everybody gets one. And it's not to say that's good or bad. It's just we have to also identify that within ourselves because it's retrograde. But at the same time, the Sun is just like, I am fully confident and secure and feel safe, and my homie's got my back and I know exactly where I belong. And it does, I give myself a trophy and that's it. So finding the balance here is going to be really important. And so there could certainly be some hurt feelings here. There could certainly be a challenge to the ego with this opposition to Jupiter, especially retrograde as well. And at the same time that Mars is conjunct with Chiron tomorrow is going to be a real challenge. So just keep an eye out for what's going on and what's going on internally. Also, the moon will conjunct Uranus. Uranus is at 11 degrees Taurus, a woman watering the flowers in her garden. So Uranus is the path of the awakening. It is the stargate. It is the collective third eye. It is the awareness that the path to the awakening, to our highest version of ourselves collectively right now, is about cultivation of the natural world and of our natural selves. That is Taurus. It is the natural world. And so in some ways it's really nice to have the moon is exalted in Taurus. She loves to be in Taurus, not as much as that she does in Cancer. That's her home territory, but the soil will hold water, right? It doesn't hold it like the container holds it, but it will hold it, and it will drain into the soil, but it still holds it in some ways. And so I feel like with this moon in Taurus, we just want to like bury ourselves in the soil emotionally. And this moment where the moon comes across Uranus, I think, is going to be this really this really beautiful emotional and intuitive awareness and connection to the fact that we have to cultivate the natural processes and cultivate us, the natural world and the natural beauty, in order to really awaken, because there's so many aspects outside of us. And this goes along beautifully, I think, with Chiron going retrograde, actually. So this is tomorrow. There's going to be a major, I would say, readjustment period as we're going through this process. So beyond that, we have the 15th, and that is going to be another sun opposing now Pluto retrograde in Capricorn. Pluto retrograde, I mean, the fear of death is such an obvious, it's such an obvious trend right now. It's such an obvious symbol right now that is and it's very real. It's very real. Fear of death is so real, and it's sitting right on the surface. And it's in this degree of Capricorn, not only the fear of death in and of itself, but the fear of death of all of the external structures that have allowed us and have, how do I say this? Sanctified, not even sanctified. That's not the right word. It's a woman entering a convent. That's the degree, the Sabian symbol. And it's the idea that the convent, so it's total commitment to your transcendent goal, but it's completely sanctioned. That's the word. Sanctioned in some ways by the culture, because there is a convent that has been built and allowed for, and there's a recognition that that type of commitment to the spiritual goal is valuable to the whole community. And so a space is provided in order to do that. And Pluto is just destroying it. And so the places that we felt secure and safe in order to go and completely commit ourselves to our spiritual goal is being destroyed right in front of our eyes, which leaves us kind of blowing in the wind, in terms of, well, what structure does support that? What structure that the community or the culture identifies as appropriate allows us to commit totally. It's being excavated and turned away. And when I say excavated, we are looking at the much deeper structures of that as well. And so not only is it being pulled away from us, but it's also, Pluto is pulling up all of the darkness around it too, and being like, is this the type of, do we, like, think about, like, if you find out that there's all this darkness and there's all this underground shadiness about the convent or the the sisterhood or anything like that. And then you have to but you have to reconsider if that's where you even want to place yourself. And it is setting us up for a major transformation, but you can't have the transformation until that one aspect dies away. And so the opposition with the sun in Cancer here, it's there is no external structure that is allowing us to completely commit to our goal of transcendence. We have to find it within the everyday interpersonal relationships. There is no convent that has been built for us to go to and to push out the outside world in order to focus. That is being destroyed, and all of the negative dark aspects Pluto is bringing up about it. And the sun is in a position in its opposition. It's saying that's drawing our attention to the fact that it's only within the personal relationships that we are able to, and the dynamic energetically and emotionally, that is the context where our spiritual development can happen. But that's an individualized experience. We create that within the context of our emotional relationships, whereas in Capricorn, the society creates it for us and sanctions it in a way. So again, this opposition here is going to be is going to challenge us to find this balance point, because we need to identify what's not working and what Pluto is bringing up to the surface about these structures, and we could really even extend this to in real time about the church, the Catholic Church, right? Because nuns are part of, well, Christian nuns, a convent. I mean, there are Buddhist nuns too. But let's talk in terms of the Catholic Church. I mean, that is being unearthed, and that's been happening a long time, but it's also becoming way more a topic of conversation and a focus in terms of the larger political and social sphere right now. And the sun leading us in our ego to rely solely on the interpersonal relationships and not even identify what's going on over here. We have to find that balance point, and I think this is really challenging, specifically because we're so afraid of what this means, because we all fear death. That is just part of life. Well, at least in our culture. I think that our Western culture is incredibly unhealthy when it comes to the considerations of death and what it means. That's my personal opinion, and that's based on my own study of death and dying in it psychologically and in various cultures as well. And so we can't focus just on here and what's falling apart, because then we don't focus on, well, what do we do individually and emotionally and personally to create that container of transcendence for ourselves. But if we stay only here, we're not focusing either on these aspects that we have to at least acknowledge, because Pluto demands it. We can't ignore what, you know what I mean? Pluto will catch up. So again, this balance point is really important between our personal ego and individual emotional security around these things, and the structures that we have built over time in our culture that are housing the ability to have a spiritual and transcendent experience. Okay. The moon will still be in Taurus at this point, and so then we move on to Wednesday, the 6th, Thursday. Excuse me. Thursday the 16th. The moon is now in a Gemini. That means the moon is going to conjunct with Venus, who is now direct. The last time the moon was in Gemini, Venus was retrograde. So this is going to be a different experience, because Venus is full speed ahead with Gemini, and being like, all right, now I have a different perspective of what I value in terms of the ideas and the thoughts and the perspectives, and how I communicate, and what channels of information I value, and the relationships that I have, how I value them within the context of communication and, curiosity. Like Venus is valuing all these things and has went over them already and is now coming back over them with a different perspective. It's just like, okay, now I see what I value about being curious and taking in data and what it means in the context of my relationships and my resources and how all of that fits together. So when the moon, again, comes and meets, so we have these two incredibly feminine energies coming together in a masculine air sign, this experience will become very personal at the same time that it also will highlight what we value about the thought process and our ability to communicate and take in information. And this is, there's not a ton going on while the moon is in Gemini other than the moon transits as well. So we come into Friday, the 17th, and this is where it starts to get interesting. So we had the moon, so the line up with Venus. Then the moon is going to meet with the nodes, especially the North Node. And then we are going to have that emotional, personal experience with where our collective destiny is. And that's going to be a really, enlightening moment, I think, because we either, even though it conjuncts the North Node, that means that it's the moon will be in opposition to the South Node. So that's a balance point, again, in an opposition that we'll have to find, but at the same time, this will be activated very strongly. Also, Saturn will be quincunx the nodes as well. And so Saturn retrograde in Capricorn, which is the actual material reality in and of itself, having really is not conjunct, not lining up whatsoever with these collective destiny and collective karmic history points. In fact, it won't even make any sense where we are right now in real time. The actual physical material reality will not seem to match up in either way with where this dragon has been and where it's headed. It won't make any sense. So this will be an adjustment point as well. And this will also be when, like I said, the moon will also quincunx Saturn and conjunct the nodes. So this will be we'll have a personal experience of these dynamics at the same time. So by the time Friday comes around, there's going to be things that don't seem to make any sense. And that's going to be an opportunity to make some adjustments within ourselves emotionally, because at this point, then the moon moves into Cancer, which is its home. She's home in Cancer, okay? And that means she's going to conjunct with Mercury, who is now direct, squaring Chiron, retrograde in Aries, sextile Uranus and Taurus, and then square this Mars and Aries energy. And so, especially coming back over where the moon was at the new moon at the beginning of this cycle. So it'll be kind of this opportunity to go back to that old place and just have one more moment of remembering the solar eclipse and the new moon at 0 degrees Cancer, and kind of how it feels now to have these relationships with all these other aspects, the square to the Aries energy, and then conjuncting with Mercury in Cancer. We are going to get a sense of where we think we belong and what ideas allow us to feel safe, and the communication that allows us to feel safe, and how we talk to each other as well. And it's going to be square to Aries, all that Aries energy, which gives no shits about how anybody else feels. It's kind of like the Leo energy, but it's cardinal, and so you want to act on it somehow, whereas the Sun and Leo energy is fixed fire. It just is. It's combustion, right? And this is going to be right before the new moon. And so the new moon happens on, let's see, that's the 18th. There's the 19th. And then we have the 20th, which is the new moon. So you can see right here that the moon's already moved into Leo. So it was conjunct at 28 to 29 degrees Cancer. And this degree is a Greek muse weighing newborn twins on a scale. When we get to the end of Cancer, we are so stable and secure with who we are and where we are rooted that our intuition is able to actually weigh out these options that are now newly presented to us. And once we're without any outside influence, without any structures that are um and it's emotional, it's completely intuitive. It's not like Gemini opposition where it's in the mind. It is completely within the realm of our intuition because we feel so rooted and strong in who we are, that we are able to use that intuition to balance these new perspectives that are these new perspectives and choices that are presented to us. And this is going to be the new moon, right? So this is where we have an opportunity to set seeds of intention around our ability to actually trust our intuition when we are presented with these new opportunities and which one we are going to go with. And we don't know which one we're going to go with, and we have to trust ourselves so deeply and so strongly that no, we can't rely on our minds. We can't really rely on the passion necessarily that comes from the fire energy. We have to rely on our emotional aspect, our deep intuition, which is the water. And from there, I don't believe that the new moon is us making that decision. It is setting the intention that throughout the next cycle that we will be able to make that decision as that lunar cycle fulfills itself throughout the month. So mid-July to mid-August. And moving into Leo season with the sun and the moon, and then later Mercury, but specifically the sun in its home territory of Leo, we are going to feel very brazen and very confident and very royal and very regal and very sovereign. And so we definitely want to set an intention that we can trust our intuition, not our ego, to make the right decision when presented with these two new opportunities. Because if we don't, then we're going to allow other forces to impact how we make those decisions. And we have to rely on our own deeply rooted sense of self and personal power to get through this time, because there's so many things that are coming at us to try to sway us, influence us. And at the end of it all, it's really going to come down to each individual person's integrity and their core power to decide what is best for them without anybody else's input, without anybody else's manipulation or any other entity's manipulation or information. Okay. So that's the weekly astrology. I hope that you found it helpful. Everything you need is in the description box below. Please reach out if you're interested in a reading. Now's the time if you want to get booked for next week, because I'm pretty booked right now for this week, and starting to take bookings for next week. So reach out either Facebook or you can email me directly. There is a link for donations through PayPal if you feel so called to donate to this work. These videos are free and I like to keep them that way, but they do take time and energy. So donations are always appreciated. And please take care of yourselves as we move through this time. As always, drink plenty of water, get out into nature, take breaks from the screen. Meditation is really, really important right now. Listening to your inner voice. Dream work is going to be essential as we're moving into the late stages of Cancer energy. And with the moon also moving through Taurus and Gemini and then eventually into Cancer as well, we can get an incredible amount of information from our dreams. So don't be afraid to look into them to get the answers you need for yourself. Be mindful that we are going into territory where it's going to become less and less possible to get the information solely from outside of us, or to even find validation based on people agreeing with us either. It's getting to the point where each and every person on an individual personal level needs to be strengthening their root core sense of self, because if we're relying on outside forces. Again, this is where Chiron retrograde is incredibly useful and incredibly painful. This is very challenging times, my friends. So take care of yourselves. I'll see you on the next video, which will probably be the daily catalyst for tomorrow. Bye.